man. You cannot marry a woman without gills. You're from two different worlds. Oh, I've wasted my life.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and it's time for another news article discussion kind of thing. I guess people are enjoying the face cam, so they're enjoying the videos more when I have the face. Maybe we have a visual demonstration. On that side, there it is. On that side, so we'll probably just try this format out moving forward with a lot of the videos. And today, we're going to be talking about DC Comics Wonder Women of History. They got a list of 17 women with their accomplishments. They're going to be in this big anthology book, all written by women or transgender women, illustrated as well, coming out from DC Comics. And here to talk with me about that is my good friend, a man that's known to write, spit a yarn about Donald Trump here and there, and maybe Donald Trump associated comic books. How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. I love these political talks. You know that.
Absolutely. You're the perfect guy to talk about this, because in this 17 names, there's a lot of different people in there. But the big ones are kind of political and Beyonce. So those are the ones we'll cover first, and we'll kind of hit the other people that are in this. But before we get to the details on what we think about the Wonder Women of history, I do want to say, if you've been coming to the channel but you haven't subscribed and you like comic books, what are you thinking? Thinking Critical is the place for you. Definitely subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. Give us an enormous thumbs up if you enjoy this content. Give us an enormous thumbs down if you don't. Either way, we want to hear your feedback in the comment section. We'll definitely be reading it and getting back to the commenters. Now, Tim, this video or this comic book will be coming out in December, and the big names are obviously right here at the top of the list. They're all political. We've got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, also known as AOC, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Elizabeth Warren, and Rashida Tlaib. Now, obviously, when you think of the Wonder Women of history, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is on the Supreme Court. I kind of get that one. But the other three members here, I'm not sure why they're on there. Like, it doesn't feel like their accomplishments really warrant being one of the Wonder Women of history, do they?
No, they don't. End of story.
Well, hopefully we'll get some more video than that.
Well, it depends on how we want to look at it. We can look at it from kind of the big scope politics or going down to the nitty-gritty. We talked a little bit before we went live about some of these people. There's a handful of on there. I actually did probably a more thorough dive than I did, looking individually and looking at the accomplishments of some of them. And there are people on there where, regardless of their gender or their race, what they accomplished would actually be somewhat noteworthy. For example, you mentioned Serena Williams. She probably is, as far as female athletes go, probably the top female athlete in tennis for what she does. Whereas a lot of them, you replace their race or their gender with something else, of super female, and also haven't really accomplished anything. I think the funny thing is looking at this from kind of a big picture perspective. Let's say you were to look at it from this kind of celebration of women in history. Why aren't people like Susan B. Anthony on there or Amelia Earhart on there? There's a lot of women who historically have made great strides in terms of how they advance culture, advance science, politics, history, religion, and they're not on there. When they put prominently people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Talib, Elizabeth Warren, when those are your front and center pieces, the first four names that you list on there, one, they're not historical, because aside from even like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who in her step should have been Sandra Connor, they're not even historical in the sense that they've accomplished anything that merits any type of historicity. So the fact that they're on there means that it's a political ploy. There's a reason why they took four people who are rather contemporary and happen to just lean left on the political spectrum, that they're there. So this is not a celebration of even women in history. This is definitely a political propaganda tool for DC Comics.
Yeah, and there's some weird names in here. I will talk about Rashida Tlaib first, because she's kind of a known anti-Semite within the U.S. Congress. DC Comics, Marvel Comics, the creators behind the history of comic books, are historically, there's a lot of Jews or Jewish men specifically that have created a lot of this. It's weird that they would celebrate somebody who's out there is a known anti-Semite. It's almost like they're slapping the face of the history of the comic industry.
Yeah, and then you have people like Elizabeth Warren, who's on there. And again, I think when you look at it, it's not just looking at necessarily or they're trying to get other people as well. But other than Elizabeth Warren's major claim to fame, which is the dubious nature of her Native American heritage, I mean, I think her grand accomplishment was like approving a post office, actually. So you have these people they're known in terms of wider political and pop culture circles, but when you look at their accomplishments, they're very scant in terms of what they've been doing. But to your point with Rashida Tlaib and her criticism of whether it be Jewish people as a whole or just Israel, yeah, that is kind of strange. Maybe they're offsetting that with Ruth Bader Ginsburg on there because she is a very noteworthy and prominent Jewish woman and obviously Supreme Court judge. But it is, I don't know. The whole list is kind of a dumpster fire when you look at the people that could have been on it.
Absolutely. So talking about AOC, obviously she's in the news a lot. I don't know why this weird thing that we've got to deify our politicians and pop stars or whatnot. But really, if you look at how she was elected in New York, I believe it was one of the lowest turnouts in the history of like the district that she represents. Like I think maybe like 9% of registered voters actually showed up and actually voted to put her into office. It's not like people were enthused to have AOC in office. And what has she really done? Like, while she's been in Congress, she drove out like 25,000 jobs from New York, right? Yes.
She gloated over not offering an Amazon deal, which would have given those jobs to New Yorkers. And it was dumb. I mean, what has she accomplished legislatively? She's known for her youth.
The Green New Deal, right?
And the Green New Deal, which is disastrous. It would be disastrous to the country.
They looked at the numbers. They were like, wow, this would actually like bankrupt the entire country.
Right. And so she's the political equivalent of basically a reality TV couple, only famous for being a reality TV couple. That's basically her claim to fame is, you go, girl. Yeah, here she comes. Like, well, she hasn't accomplished anything.
Apparently, she is good at generating money. She's good at going out there and getting donations into her campaign and the other candidates that she supports. But I don't really. That's not like an accomplishment. That's that's campaigning.
That's basically. I mean, I guess in terms of fundraising, that's good. But then again, someone's like Benny Hill. So I don't know. I would not consider that a historical accomplishment by any measure.
Yeah, so it's just weird that you have the four politicians, the four political deities. I don't know what it is about our country that wants to make some of these politicians into. They're just people. If you put that much faith into a politician, you are going to get burned. They're just people, and once you get to a certain point, you probably burn a lot of people to get there. Obviously, there are exceptions here and there. Just look at it. We kind of talk about them. The other big name on here is Beyonce. I guess she's a big pop star. I think she's done a lot of activist stuff. I think isn't she one of the people that is like really about green legislation and stuff, but is always traveling the world in private jets.
Exactly. And Beyonce is another one of those where it's like, okay, again, the title of your book is Women of History. So you're looking at someone like Beyonce, but you can easily think of someone else who could probably replace her and keep all of those qualities, whether it be her skin color or her gender, intact. Look at Aretha Franklin, right? Like you have these people who historically have made major gains in the same fields that these people are said to be representing, and yet they're not there, which means that a lot of this is just political posturing and really not having a lot to do with the history angle whatsoever.
Yeah, it's strange. And I'll freely admit this comic book is not for me. I wouldn't buy this. Likely, if they had a bunch of people, I don't think DC is going to do Wonder Women of history all that much justice. But certainly with this list, it's certainly not for me. And would you buy this if it had a bunch of women that you really respected on it? Like, are you interested in political comics like that?
I believe that all these comics should have a right to exist. I think that's actually good. I mean, recently, a year or two ago, some people were asking me if I would put down or comment on the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez comic that came out. And I said, well, I certainly have an opinion regarding it. I mean, it's basically me trying to heckle it or throw tomatoes at it. But as far as it exists is concerned, no. I mean, obviously, I think that it should. I think that that's the great thing about a free capitalistic society and a market is that if there's an audience for it and people like it, then sure, I think that they can buy it. On the other hand, I think that it's also our right to call out propaganda when we see it. And part of capitalistic society is also voting with your wallet. And by people like you or me not buying this, whether it be because of a political reason, because it's not a cup of tea, I think that says something as well. So no, I think if you're watching this video and there's something that interests you, buy it. I'm not trying to persuade you not to. I'm just saying that the reason.
Yeah, we're just talking about the list of people and like, is this really the Wonder Women of history? So there are a few people on this list. You mentioned one of them already. Serena Williams, probably the greatest female tennis player ever, possibly the greatest female athlete of all times. Certainly belongs to the list. I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It probably should be Sandra Day O'Connor, but that's neither here nor there. Ellen Ochoa was the first Hispanic woman in space, also the director of the Johnson Space Center. Certainly a big accomplishment. She was an astronaut, she was in space, and she ran the Johnson Space Center. That's a big accomplishment. Dominic Dawes was the first Black person of any nationality or gender to win a gold medal in the Olympics. That feels like a big accomplishment. But then when we get to the rest of the names, I just don't get it. Like there's one chunk of just obscure people you've never heard of that really haven't accomplished very much. And then there's another chunk of activists. So we'll get to the obscure people first. And there's one of them that you're just going to laugh. The first one, her name is Tiara Fraser. She's the CEO of Isku Air, some Canadian airline, but she was named one of Canada's most powerful women in 2019. Okay, never heard of that lady. Zhang Li was... I can't make this up. Was the director or one of the directors of the Center for Infectious Diseases at Wuhan.
Wow.
So we're celebrating failure here, folks. Obviously, I believe she was one of the whistleblowers a few months after the fact. But coronavirus is a worldwide pandemic. She was at the heart of it, and she was one of the directors of the center. Tig Notaro, she's apparently a comedian. Have you ever heard of her?
Well, so shouldn't this be called Wonder Women of the present? Because that's what
some of the activists are no longer with us, but most of these women are still alive.
Okay, but most of them, the vast majority of them.
Vast majority.
Yeah, and then the other thing, and this is again going into the political angle. Pretty much everyone here, if they're not an activist, which typically, whenever you think of activists, that typically skews left. Same thing with like the word protester. And then you have the people like Xi Jinping, who, again, that's a very dubious person put on there given certain contemporary events that have transpired. But when you extract those, the commonality everyone has in common, they're all left. There is not a single person here who is probably a Republican.
No, there's no representation.
No, because it's a representation of gender and race identity, but not ideology. That is 100% for sure.
So just the other people in there, Kiko Agena is some Asian American TV actress I've never heard of. Janelle Monáe apparently is a singer, songwriter, rapper, actress, producer. Never heard of her. Then we get to the activist. Edith Windsor is an LGBTQ rights activist. Marsha P. Johnson is a noted drag queen, gay liberation, and AIDS activist, no longer with us. Emma Gonzalez was one of the Parkland shooting survivors and is a gun control advocate. And Judith Howman is a disability rights activist. Okay, so we got a lot of activists and stuff, but it's just weird if you think Wonder Women of history. If it has to be American, where's Harriet Tubman? Where's Susan B. Anthony?
Right.
Where's Laura Ingalls Wilder? Where's Clara Barton, the founder of the Red Cross? Where's Amelia Earhart? Where's Coretta Scott King, Sandra Day O'Connor, Rosa Parks, Sacagawea, Oprah? There are a lot of more accomplished women in history, even American history, than what we have right here. Then if we want to go to like world history, Anne Frank, Queen Elizabeth I, Marie Curie. Like the list goes on and on. This is like the wonder who they are, women of history. This is such an obscure list, and I don't know. I'm not impressed.
I think our again, if you want to buy this book, anyone listening out there, by all means, go ahead. There's nothing that I'm gonna do to stop you, or Wes, for that matter. But what we are doing is I am pointing out from a political perspective, because it's almost like a sub world that I live in. This is definitely a propaganda piece. I know, like, it sounds like conspiracy theory. Trust me, I have worked in marketing, I have worked in merchandising, I run in political circles. This is propaganda. There's a reason why it's branded as Wonder Women of history, because it makes it sound universally appealing. History is something that, even though it's written by the winners, history tends to be something that's set in stone, that stories of our past, and they typically have significance, which is why we study history. This is history. A lot of it is mostly contemporary. So the branding should be women of today, or women of modern times.
Possible women, Wonder Women of the future.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, people who have not done anything yet maybe will in the future. So the whole thing, it just makes a propaganda piece. I'm sure that, I would love to do this, but I'm not in a position to. I would love to talk to someone pretty high up in DC and be like, hey, so are you doing something that's more towards conservatives? Well, what do you mean by that? Well, you had the thing that came out called Women of History. It's like, well, this isn't a leftist thing. There's a reason why we branded it as of history. It's like two things. One, it's not of history, because most people are, one, still alive. Two, it's definitely a leftist propaganda piece, because arguably you don't have anyone in there who's necessarily like conservative. Oh, well, we have some people on there who don't fall in that spectrum, but they're not. Yeah, but there are people who probably pigeonhole into the left simply because of where they stand, their other efforts. So it's kind of a brilliant piece in terms of trying to have an airtight form of propaganda that is arguably not political by nature, but come on, anyone with two neurons can tell that it's definitely it's a propaganda piece for the leftists over at DC Comics, which is fine. I mean, we all kind of know that that tends to be the comic book industry as a whole. It tends to lean a certain way.
Absolutely. And I remember when DC did their firings and Andy Coury was out, and I remember Paley was on the chain. He was like, DC's cleaning house. They're getting rid of all the lefties. It's all about money right now. I was like, I think you're crazy. I think he got fired because they had to fire somebody, and he was annoying on social media. But I think it's clear with the hiring of Daniel Cherry, and then we see this coming out. DC is still leaning heavily into politics and whatnot, and that's fine. It's their company; they can do what they want. I'm not going to read this comic book, so it's not going to ruin my day. But I'm just saying, these aren't the Wonder Women of history. It's a dubious list at best. There are a lot of deserving women that probably should be in here. Unfortunately, they won't be. And a lot of people with not many accomplishments, or not any real accomplishments at all, are going to be celebrated in here. Like I said, there are a few, but it's a very unimpressive list if you want to look at accomplishments within the spectrum of history, or even recent history, if we're being completely honest. I know that there was some audio issues. At least that's what it sounded like from my end with Tim's audio. I hope it actually comes out clean in the recording. If it doesn't, I do apologize. I am in the Philippines. Tim's in the United States. Sometimes we don't get the cleanest audio. If you stuck with us, I do appreciate that. Tim, is there anything else that you wanted to say before we kind of wrap this up?
No, I'm Trump 2020. That's it.
All right, then, Tim. What's it?
I am on here for political talk, and so I know that some people don't like that. That's not to their taste. But I'm pretty open in terms of my political views, and so that's why I am a contributor on Wes's channel on Thinking Critical, because a lot of times I do have a take that I have that is kind of dangerous for other people to say, but I'm not afraid to say it. So I really appreciate people who have stuck around.
We love you here, and I appreciate your perspective because you are a professional artist. You have made political comics in the past, and I really appreciate that. Tim, thank you so much. We'll be seeing you around. I do want to say this to the viewers. Salamat po.
Salamat po.